Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this world of ours. We always here at Inspired Living like to say, you are the inspired and the inspiration. So let's be inspired, let's inspire others, and let's inspire before we expire. Welcome to Inspired Living, where every moment is an opportunity to ignite your passion and curiosities and embrace the many mysteries, phenomenon, the unknown, the ordinary, and yes, the extraordinary. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, here with you yet again for another soul adventure, an inspiring episode to explore, discuss, and discover the many diamonds within each and every one of us and the many hidden gems that are yet to be revealed to us and the rest of the world. I'm thrilled to have you join us today as we embark on a journey of inspiration, motivation, and transformation. Whether you're tuning in from the comfort of your home, on the road, or wherever life takes you, this show is designed to uplift your spirit and empower your dreams. Inspired Living is all about fostering a supportive and empowering community, and each episode will highlight incredible guests who have overcome challenges, pursued their passions, and make a positive impact in their respected fields in our amazing and beautiful world. The journey matters, or we want to celebrate your victories, no matter how big or how small. Together, we can cultivate a mindset of possibility and unlock the doors to our dreams. Inspired listeners can expect engaging discussions, thought-provoking questions, and actionable steps to manifest inspiration into your own reality. Of course, we always want to give a big shout out and say thank you to all of our inspired listeners from around the globe, the universe, and yes, beyond. The team and I are always so very humbled and grateful for you listening, downloading, subscribing, leaving reviews, and voting to make Inspired Living a best inspirational show and a best spiritual show to follow and listen to as referenced by FeedSpot. So we do really appreciate the listening and the reviews, and we appreciate you. So thank you, inspired listeners. If you've not yet subscribed, liked, or followed the show, there's always time to do so over on our main social media platforms at Facebook. Just look for the community Inspired Living Radio and Podcasts. Instagram, Blue Sky, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Just look for Inspired For Us. That's the number 4, Inspired For Us. And of course, you can always listen to us over on the YouTube channel, Inspired Living Radio. And we're also now streaming through Audible. And you can listen to us wherever you get your favorite podcast. So let's get ready to be inspired, uplifted, encouraged, and motivated, because the best is always yet to come. So let's go prospecting together, shall we? So I'm welcoming to the show for the first time Karen Docherty. She's coming in from Scotland, all the way across the pond, and I want to give just a little bit of a background in her journey. Since she discovered her abilities, Karen has worked tirelessly to bring the word of spirit to those who need it most. From the UK to the USA, from Asia to Australia, clients from all over the world meet with Karen to receive readings, enroll in mentorships, and share a space for discussions on the power of spirit. And that's today's episode. We're going to be talking about not just the power of spirit, but we're going to be talking about the healing of spirit, the intelligence of spirit, the support and love of spirit. A woman with spirit and a breath of fresh air, Karen offers a contemporary approach to psychic work and mediumship based on traditional principles. Filled with love and compassion, she stands as one of the most reputable and skilled mediums in modern times. And Karen offers one-to-one sessions as well as mentorship, and she also gives public demonstrations of mediumship. If you want to learn more about the journey, you can get all of the content on our social media pages, but you can also go to her main website, which is Docherty.com, and that's spelled DOCHERTY.com. Karen, welcome to Inspired Living.
It's nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you got into mediumship.
Yeah, Yeah, so I am from Scotland, as you probably can tell. And my mediumship journey really began when I was a young child. I would say maybe around the age of 2 or 3. But really, I didn't know about mediumship. I didn't call it mediumship until I was maybe in my late teens. So for all of my childhood and into my young adult life, it was more about just experiencing things and knowing that it was spirit, knowing that it was from the other place, as I used to call it, but never realizing that I was a medium until later.
Right. And I want to read a little bit of quote that we had posted on our page. And this is a quote from you, Karen. It says, quote, "The loss of a loved one brings questions, heartache, and a longing for connection. But love doesn't end when life does. It only changes form. And through the gift of spirit, I'm blessed to bring you messages of comfort, healing, and hope, reminding you that those you love still walk beside you, guiding and supporting you from the other side. When you hear their words, you begin to live with peace, knowing that love truly never dies." Or as we like to say in the mediumship community, life after life. Not life after death, but life after life, because life does continue on. So for the listeners out there, Karen, give us a little bit of background of how someone comes into mediumship, because I've had many guests on the show, and everybody comes into mediumship in their own unique way and in their own timing. Tell the inspired listeners a little bit about your journey of how you became even aware of this concept called mediumship.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the timing, because I often feel it is to do with the timing more than anything else. I think every person that works with their mediumship, maybe they've gone through things in life first before they've kind of arrived at their mediumship. And that's certainly what happened for me. Even though I could see spirits from when I was younger, and I used to speak to my grandmother about it, and she used to tell me, the dead don't harm you. She normalised it. She knew it was natural. Even though I had that kind of support, I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I felt a little bit different, and I would pick things up for people and didn't know where it was coming from. So throughout my childhood, like I say, and into my early teens, that's really what it was all about. And then later in life, when my children were small, it became overwhelming, the voices, the messages, the spirit world, just feeling them all the time. So much so that I went and spoke to a medium about it, and then it just kind of started from there.
So do you think, the connection and the channeling increased after you had children? I know you said you had it there since a small child, but did the connection, because you brought forth life, right? And I'm just wondering if by bringing forth children, if that enhanced your ability of your mediumship.
No, I don't think so. I think that I'd always had the channeling, I'd always had the communication, but I think by that time, I think I was more ready to accept it or ready to look at it. I think it was more about me maturing and kind of looking at that situation as it occurred, rather than when I was younger and life was busy and things were going on. And, I think it was just about a timing thing.
When you say the word acceptance, I think that's a big part of the journey, is awareness and acceptance. And now for the listening audience, you said you see the spirit world. So let's talk about objectively versus subjectively, and actually seeing the spirit person in our mind versus seeing them with the eyes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting point, because as mediums, I'm not sure about yourself, but I know that we say things like, oh, I can see this and I can see that. And most of the time, for me anyway, it is within my mind's eye. It is that I see spirit within what I say is my spirit eyes or my spirit ears. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen out with that. Sometimes physically I will see them, but more often than not, it's it's in the mind, it's in the mind's eye.
Yeah, and I bring that up because when I started this journey, 2 decades ago, I didn't actually see the spirit world. I didn't see my brothers, those that have gone on before me. I didn't see them physically with the physical eye. And over time and through mentorship and education, I realized that there are some mediums out there that can. I've got a few students in my group that actually can objectively see the spirit person with the human eye. But for our listeners out there, we're just kind of laying this down in layman terms. When a medium says that they see the spirit person, Those are the two concepts, objectively versus subjectively. And what Karen is saying is subjectively is in the mind's eye, the third eye chakra, the clairs that are associated with mediumship. And there's a lot of different clairs that we'll get to here in just a little bit later in the show. But that clairsentience, that clairvoyance seen within the mind's eye is a big part of mediumship, which we call mental mediumship. And I'm with you. I can honestly say, out of all the readings I've done, I've only ever seen the objective spirit connection maybe 10 times. I could count probably less on my two hands that I've actually seen them. And when I see them with the physical eye, it's such a beautiful moment, because even your human brain goes, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Right? It shows you the power of the ego. But subjectively, when it's coming through my mind's eye, I'm like, oh, okay, just accept it. So seeing is believing. But for the listeners out there, I just want them to be aware of, when mediums say that, I see that there are a few different ways, and each medium is unique and each medium is different. But where in this journey after acceptance and awareness, which is a great, important part of the journey, something I had to come to my own awareness and my own acceptance of this, how were you able to learn to channel the communications and the voice of spirit?
Yeah, I think the acceptance part is correct. That is a big part of it. And I think for me, it was more about accepting that I was blessed enough to do something like this. Like, I remember feeling like I'm not a medium. Like, to me, I mean, I'd always followed mediumship. I'd always watched mediums, listened. I was always very spiritual. But for me to actually be able to do this, I couldn't believe that I was blessed enough to do this. So I think that was a big part of it for me. And moving forward through my development, then I started to, obviously do the meditations and sit for spirit and drinking lots of knowledge about the spirit world, because I remember feeling like if I'm going to do this, then I have to make sure I am doing what I say I'm doing, because that was a big part of it for me as well. It's a huge responsibility, really, when you're working in mediumship. The trust, I think, for knowing what you're doing does have to develop. Like, it's not something that I feel comes overnight or straight away. I think it is about persevering with that and getting to know your own mediumship. And then thereafter, I feel that that's when the trust comes in and your mediumship becomes a little bit stronger. That's from a personal point of view.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I love that you're sharing that with the listening audience, because trust is a big, important part of this. Awareness, acceptance. Those are three pillars that I actually teach on myself. Because I'll be honest with you, Karen, when I started to come into this awareness of mediumship, I didn't really know much about it. And I had seen a few TV shows, but when I started using the words psychic and medium, I had my own vision of what I thought it was, a television commercial, call and predict your future. It's none of that. It's not fortune telling. It's not predicting future. And, over where you're at in Scotland, I think that there's more of a foundation for spiritualism in psychic and medium and healing, in Scotland, in the UK, compared to here in the United States. And so I love that you moved into that trust factor, to trust, but also develop, because it does take time. I tell my students all the time, I've been working on this for 20 years, and I feel like I'm just learning how to crawl, yet alone, learn to walk, right? We learn to crawl before we walk. And so, for those of you that are out there listening to today's show, give yourself patience, give yourself that trust, awareness, and acceptance. If you're having communication, because it is a higher form of communication, and you start thinking, well, how do I talk to somebody that no longer has a voice cord or a vibration off a vocal cord? And that's where you start to work with your development, which is so very important, is to stay dedicated to your own development. So how long have you been working on, I know that you're a teacher now and you do private consultations and mentorship, but how long did you get mentored before you felt comfortable stepping out into the public to talk about this publicly and openly?
I really sat what we call in Scotland is a home circle. It's really traditional in Scotland, and I know some other parts of the world are the same. So when you sit in this home circle, that's when you start to develop your mediumship with a small group of people. And when I first entered into my first home circle, it was meant to be like for 3 years. It was a set thing. Our teacher was very old school. She just said it's a 3-year thing, you have to commit to it, and that was fine.
Yep.
So I expected to be there for that amount of time, but actually what happened with mine was it seemed to move very quickly towards platform mediumship, demonstrating, and I felt like that's where my strength was within my mediumship. So I started to develop that side of things as well. So I would say I probably was out working within maybe a year, 18 months, but I wasn't fully confident. I was kind of finding my feet. I was going to fledgling evenings and just learning my craft really as I went along. But even so, even all these years later, and I think you'll agree with this, your development keeps going. It's not something that stops. You're continually trying to understand your mediumship, and as your mediumship moves, you have to move with it, and you do have to stay very dedicated. So although I was maybe 18 months and I was out working, for me that felt very quick, but my development continued thereafter.
Yeah, I think you make a very valid point in the fact when I started doing this, for your listeners out there, platform means being up on the stage and connecting to an audience versus just a one-on-one reading, more of a private sitting. The platform that Karen's talking about is being out in the public, and you can have anywhere from 50 to 200 people. It just depends on the venue. But the process, and we stand on shoulders of great teachers and mentors that have helped us to have this discussion in today's modern age of modern mediumship. And I remember my mentor when I started down this path. She said it's not a straight and narrow path. It's a long and windy road, and it's lifelong learning. So you're always, as long as you stay dedicated, you're always going to learn something from the spirit world, but you're also going to heal. And I don't see a lot of that in the United States about the healing aspect of mediumship, which is a big part of what we do as mediums. And I just said, that's always stuck with me, because she said, at some point, Mark, you're going to have a responsibility of giving these readings and speakings for others. But also when I make that journey to the other side, I'm also going to be held responsible for the conversations of the people that I'm representing and speaking on their behalf. And so that's always stuck with me as a responsibility to be the best medium I can. And I'm sure, Karen, that you would agree with that, because we are speaking on the behalf of people that no longer have a voice, but are still very much alive and find different ways to communicate with us. But let's talk about the healing aspect of it, because I believe that is a big part. I know why that's how I went into mediumship, was more about my own healing versus giving readings to people. Tell me a little bit about the healing journey for you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Mark. Everything you've just said, I think it's a huge part of it is the healing. It's the main part of it, really, because even if you think about the evidential mediumship, which is what you're delivering, that evidence is then to bring healing, because you're letting someone know their loved one is still there, and you're bringing that forward. And for me, the healing takes place on both sides. So when I deliver communication or speak to someone about this, the healing for the spirit world takes place, because they still have that need to communicate with us. So they in turn get the healing from that, but the person here, the client here, also will always benefit from that healing. And I think if people recognize that that's what mediumship is for and what it should be for, instead of just the entertainment thing that seems to be the massive thing, it's about entertainment, and that's something I could never say. I've never said mediumship's about entertainment. It just doesn't sit well for me, because like you said, if you've got a mother in the spirit side coming forward to communicate, it's not about entertainment. It's much, much more than that. So I think for the healing for me in my mediumship is the most vital part, and that's the part that I concentrate on the most when I'm working.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that for the inspired listeners out there, if you could visually envision a triangle and three sides of the triangle, one part of that triangle is the spirit world, and those that step forward to the other side of the triangle, which is the medium. And then, of course, that bottom part of the triangle is your sitter. And so that triangle, when that triangle comes together, the information that can flow brings healing for all three aspects, not just the spirit person coming forward, and not just for the sitter, but the medium itself can be healed by some of the messages or some of the coincidences or synchronicities that we often come across with doing this work, which is, it's not an easy path for our listeners out there. But if you stay with it and you trust the process and you get some good teachers like Karen and mentorship, you'll start to understand that there is a world within a world, and that the spirit world and those that reside there are not dead. They're very much alive, and they're only ever a thought away. And so mediumship brings a lot of healing to our world, but also to the spirit world and those that seek us out. So as far as your journey, you said that you started to become aware of this when you were much younger. And I want to talk about that for the listeners out there, because I did not. I know that there are those that have the natural abilities, that are born with these abilities, whether it's the psychic and or the mediumship, which there is a big difference between the two that we'll talk about. But I didn't come to this awareness only until actually trauma and tragedy with the loss of several family members, murder, brain cancer, multiple sclerosis. Somehow that changed my brain to start having an open reception to receive this content, these messages. So for you, how far back can you remember that you had this connection? Were you naturally born with this from the young age, or did you start to become aware of it as you got older?
Well, the youngest age I remember it is 3 years old, and I remember I was on a bus with my mum at the time, and we were passing this graveyard, this cemetery, and I looked out the window and I said to my mum, "There's lots and lots of people there. They're all walking around," and she just kind of looked at me blankly, and then I said to her, "I think I might be buried in there," and I remember the thought, and I remember saying it. But then as I grew older, even 5, 6, then up to 10, 12, even though I was receiving things like that or feeling things like that, it was natural, it felt natural to me. So I just thought everyone had those thoughts. So it wasn't really like it stood out to me or I was feeling, it's only me that gets this. I just thought, oh, okay. I just kind of took it in my stride. It wasn't until later in my teenage years that I realised that people aren't getting these messages and you are receiving something. But like I say, even when I eventually sat down to look at it, I still could not believe that I was a medium. I actually couldn't call myself a medium for about a year after I started my development because I just thought it was too much of a responsibility. I just felt like it just can't be me. I can't be that blessed. And really, I still feel the same. I take it very, very seriously, and everything that you're saying and the way that you've been taught or the way that you've came across it and developed as well just sings to my heart because I feel exactly the same.
Yeah, and it's important to have these conversations. So for the inspired listeners out there, like we said, there's two ways to see the spirit world: objectively with the human eye and subjectively with the mind, and communicate through the mind, which we call mental mediumship. But also some of you that are out there are born with this gift, and sometimes you don't want to step into your gift, which is fine, because with stepping into this gift like Karen just described, there comes a lot of opinions, a lot of judgment, a lot of how people can see you in the world. And then for some of you, you may come to the spiritual path of mediumship or psychic based on your own life experiences like I did. I was about 27 when everything started changing for me. But what I did, Karen, is I started to explore, I started to prospect. That's where the Intuitive Prospector's name was born out, because I believe everybody has intuition. It's just up to us what we want to prospect for. And so I actually started to explore, is there something real to this? Is there a science that supports it? And for you inspired listeners out there, I'll always remind you, just because you don't see it with the physical eye does not mean that it's not there. And science over the years has demonstrated that, whether it's through the power of wind, gravity, the air we breathe, the Wi-Fi signal that you're broadcasting on your computer, what's something else? The telescope, the microscope. There's all sorts of world within worlds that we can't see with the physical eye or hear with the human ear. So don't discount a young child if they're having a story or they're describing something, because young children, usually under the age of 7, don't have those filters that have been placed on education or society, and they actually have a genuine intuition that they may be seeing people at the graveyards walking around. So don't discount that. It'd be my recommendation for the young children under the age of 7. Because it is, some of you are born with this gift, and some of you, like myself, come to this gift, and I say it's a gift, through your own experiences, or what I like to call soul adventures. So Karen, one of the things that I want to talk about, we're going to go to a break here in just a few minutes, but I want to talk about the difference between psychic and mediumship, because many times I find that people want to put those two concepts together, and they're quite different based on the development between the two. Do you mind just speaking a little bit the difference between the psychic and the mediumship, and why that's important to call that out as being different?
Yeah, of course. And again, it is a term that's used quite loosely. People that are going to see mediums will call them psychics and vice versa. But, the psychic basically is when someone can link in with the person in front of them. So if a client came to see me and I was working psychically, I would be linking in with them, their soul, their spirit, everything that's connected to them, everybody that's connected to them, and I could read for them from that, their own life situations and paths and such like. Then mediumship is about connecting with those that have crossed over. So those that are no longer in the physical world, that's where mediumship comes in. So there are two different concepts. Now, every medium is psychic too, right? So so that's where you get the psychic medium. But not every psychic is mediumistic. Because sometimes you'll get a great psychic who can tune into everything around them in this world and every person, but they can't connect with the spirit world. So there lies the difference of the two.
Yeah, and just say that one more time, because I agree with you. This took me, I grappled with this concept for a few years when I first started my development, because I've always believed in the power and the intelligence of the spirit world to, if we're open to it, to develop us to become psychic and mediums. But say that one adage one more time, just for the listening audience, because I think it's very important that all mediums are psychics, but not all psychics are mediums.
Yeah, and that, and you're right, that took me time to get my head around that as well. But the thing is, if you can think about it like this, we all come here from the spirit side, and then we're born into the physical, we live life here, and then we go home. And every one of us is psychic. We all have a psychic ability. Some people call it intuition, hunches, sixth sense. We all have a different word for it, but it's basically our psychic ability. Now, some people will develop that, other people won't, but the mediumship side I feel is a completely different development.
Yeah, and the word psychic is psychosis in Greek, which means of the soul. It means of the mind. And so I agree with you. Everybody that incarnates into this physical form through energy and vibration and matter, you can choose to tune into those abilities. But again, just for the listening audience, there is a big difference on development between the psychic and the mediumship. So really think about where you want to go and have that agreement with the spirit world, because they will guide you and they will support you. So we're going to go to our first break, and then we're going to be back here in just a few minutes. We have our special guest today, Karen Docherty, and you can visit her at her website at KarenDocherty.com. And we're going to be right back. This is Inspired Living, where you are the inspiration and inspired. Stick around.
The future of internet radio is here. Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
One planet, 7.3 billion people. Only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for
summer break because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Inspired Living. We have our guest today for the first time, international psychic, medium, teacher, and mentor, Miss Karen Docherty. And you can visit her website at KarenDocherty.com. Karen, is there any other websites that we need to mention that if the Inspired listeners want to get a hold of you? I know that you're on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, no, that's the main website. That's the one to go where everything is there.
Okay, yeah, I always like to say that same thing for my website. I always just tell people that's the one-stop shop, and then you can get to wherever you want to go, whether it's booking a reading or teaching or events or articles. It's just kind of your one-stop shop. So I want to jump right back into this because this hour goes by so very quickly. But when I was researching for this show, because I love talking about spirituality and psychic and mediumship, and that wasn't always the case several years ago, but now I love what I do. And I actually came across a quote, a reference from Silver Birch, which was a channel done by a great teacher, spiritualist, many, many years ago. And Silver Birch says this: when you see a reflection in the mirror, you're not looking at the individual, but merely the semblance. The physical is but the garment man wears, and women, the means by which he or she expresses himself or herself in the world of matter. Your body is not you. You are an internal spirit. And I had to think about that for many years, Karen, because I was raised in a religious philosophy that if you weren't good enough, you went to the bad place, the fiery place. And if you were good enough, then you could get up into the pearly gates of heaven. But I can tell you, over the years of development and understanding and education, I've realized that heaven isn't a location. Heaven's a vibration. And it's, if you think about it metaphysically, you can't go up or down on a round planet. And so when you start to see the world as not just a physical world, but a world filled with different vibrations, you realize that the spirit world is not that far away from us. It's all about how we attune, or how we have that quickening to tune into those frequencies, very much similar like a radio station, right? I'm sure in Scotland you have several radio stations, but if you want to find your favorite radio station, you got to tune in. You got to manually turn the knob or turn the dial and get that frequency. Over my understanding and education of doing this, it really is about tuning into that frequency, and that comes from spiritual development. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love Silver Birch. I've read so many Silver Birch books and listened to all of there's a lot of audio actually on YouTube of the writings and things. So I agree, it's hard, I think, for people to understand what spirit is sometimes and where it is. And like you say, we're taught traditionally like heaven's up there and then the other place is down there, and that's all obviously to do with religion and things. But when you come past that and actually start to try to understand it, the best way that I can say is that when people talk about being all one and all connected, and it's just a frequency or a vibrational energy, it's the best way to kind of get your head around it, if you like. And, when you are talking about different circumstances, where we go after we pass, is there different levels in the spirit world? Well, I feel that there is. I feel like we still evolve in the spirit world. I feel like we still develop. We continue that regardless of whether we're here in the physical or there. So, of course, people can talk about different levels and things, but ultimately we are all spirit. And if you can get to know your own higher self first, then that, I feel, kind of opens a gateway for you to understand the rest of it.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's something that stuck with me for when I started to move into mentorship, when I found a teacher that I really resonated with and she had a long history of being a teacher and working with the spirit world since a very young age, and she's now in the spirit world. But she would always tell me that not just with that lifelong learning, if you choose to go down this path, it's lifelong learning to understand how everything works. But she always said this mantra, it's always stuck with me to this day, Karen: once growth stops, decay begins. And that is true not only for this world, but I find it true that it's like you just said, on the other side, just because we pass over, or what we would call death and dying, people just assume, and again, I was taught that we went and sat up in a big cloud and played a harp for the eternity. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of boring. I don't know if I'd want to do that. So the hierarchy is always in place to continue to learn, because once growth stops, decay begins. And when she said that to me, that's always stuck. And I can hear her voice at times from the other side, like, keep going, keep learning, keep helping, keep serving. And, it really is a journey of lifelong learning. And so I just wanted to share that with the listeners as well. And I do. I read a lot of Silver Birch and a lot of the pioneers from history past, because I actually I actually started to learn about mediumship. I like to say that I'm actually a British trained, accredited spiritual medium now, because when I started here in the U.S., there's a lot of people that just hang their shingles. One day they hear a voice of spirit, next day they're a professional. And I just found that there was really no credentialing or accrediting for what we do. And I found that to be a little bit disturbing, to the fact that, I said, if I'm going to go down this path, and I'm sure you're in the same boat, Karen, because we have a lot of the same philosophies and understanding of the spirit world. I said, if I'm going to do this and you want me to do this, I want to be the best at what I am doing to represent those that are coming to me. And no different than a lawyer passing the bar, no different than a doctor passing the medical boards. It is the same thing with mediumship, is find those that have had the training, find those that have been mentored and have had the life experiences. Because again, Karen and I are talking today, standing on the shoulders of pioneers that have come before us in a world that wasn't always accepting of this. I think it's more accepting today, but imagine just even 70 years ago with some of the teachers and some of the, a lot of it was done in privacy and in hidden circles, and, seances done, in the privacy of someone's home. Now it's a lot more, like you said, entertainment. It's out there, but I agree with you. I don't look at it as a form of entertainment. And I love that you sat in a development circle. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to add to that and say, I think that when you've spoken with people, pioneers of the past and the late great mediums, and been mentored by Mavis Patilla was one for me, and she's in the spirit world now. And then I've done a lot of training down at the Arthur Findlay College in London. And they're worldwide, they're known worldwide for their mediumship and their studies of spiritualism. And I think when you go through those channels, it's more about getting that accreditation, not only for yourself, but for people that are going to be coming to you, so that they can trust that you have kind of looked at the whole subject, and it's not just the entertainment factor, it's not just making money out of doing readings, it's the whole thing, the whole subject. So I completely agree with you, and I think we are very similar in our background.
Well, I think that we're similar because actually we share the same mentors. Mavis Patilla was my mentor for several years, and it was actually her fault to get me up on the platform, because it's not anything I ever wanted to do. So both her and Janet No Havoc are two of the teachers that I studied under for several years to understand the concept, along with amazing teachers that are still in the world today. But that makes sense that we would have the same philosophy, because we have the same teacher and same mentor. And again, the Arthur Findlay College, I can't speak. I can't say enough as a spiritualist. It's a college north of London in Stansted. It's been around since 1964, when the estate got turned over by the gentleman Arthur Findlay, so that spiritual, psychic healing and mediumship could continue on. And I'm very grateful for that, because I have learned over the last decade several concepts of this conversation we're having today. So for those of you that are interested in the psychic journey and or the mediumship journey or the healing journey, make sure to check out the links and what we're talking about today, because again, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with that single step. And I can tell you, listeners, when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. So now another question I have for you, Karen, is you talk about when the other side starts to communicate with us. Let's break this down into communications. You talk about, like, for example, I teach on signs, symbols, synergies, and synchronicities. And for your journey, how do loved ones, from your perspective and your education, how do we recognize these signs or these synchronicities or the synergy, which is the energy that combines everybody? Everything is energy, right? Or the symbols that come along that helps us understand that there isn't a communication process taking place. It's just, are we aware of it?
Yeah, I think a big thing about this is recognizing the feeling first. I mean, I know that we talk about signs and lots of people will get signs and then they'll question them because as well as that, your mind will tell you that it's your imagination. The mind doesn't quite understand what's happening at that point, and the mind is very powerful. So it's going to tell you that it's your imagination, or you're making it up, or it didn't happen, or it's a coincidence, all of the above. And I think so learning how to feel things can help someone really understand the presence of the messages or the communication or even the signs. Because if you get a sign from spirit, let's say you're given numbers or you receive a feather and you've not noticed it or it's just came out of nowhere, I would always say, how do you feel about that? Like, what's the feeling? Because the feeling comes from the soul and the rest comes from the mind. So it's always, I don't know about you, Mark, but I always feel like it's an ongoing battle between the two. And unless you understand the feelings behind things, it makes it difficult, doesn't it?
It really does, and it's the yin and yang of spirituality, the mind versus the heart and what we feel. And I love that you said that feeling, because many times people ask me, well, Mark, how do I know it's the actual spirit person or the spirit world versus my own imagination? And I usually tell them it's usually based on something of a feeling and also based on time. Usually if you have time to think about it, the ego mind will fill what it needs to fill, because it's the power, like you said, Karen, of the ego. But if something just drops in, for example, you're driving your car and all of a sudden a thought of your mom drops right in. You don't even have time to think about it. That is your intuition. That is the spirit world making themselves aware to you. And then all of a sudden you feel like you can feel many different emotions. Your hair may stand up. You may feel just this warmth, like a big spiritual warm hug. You may have a memory that flashes in your mind. And so for our inspired listeners out there, when you become aware of this communication style that is very ancient and it's nothing new and it's been around for centuries, you really start to see of the worlds within the worlds that I'm talking about and have written about. And for you, Karen, I love that you teach on feeling, because that's very, very important. We think too much and feel too little. If you want to go down this path, you almost have to flip it. You need to move into this, especially if you're a guy. I'm speaking to you guy listeners out there. If you really want to move into the power of the soul that Karen was just referencing, then you need to move into that feeling, that impression, which many times, as you know, Karen, Mavis would always say, push down to the claircognizant, that sense of knowing or feeling. And if it comes back 3 times, then that's usually the communication of the spirit person trying to make contact with you. And again, just a caveat here for the listeners out there, nothing to be scared of, nothing that you've seen in a Hollywood movie or something that's going to come from fear-based. That's your own mind getting in the way. I've done thousands of readings, and I'm sure, Karen, you could agree with this. I don't find the spirit world to be hostile or intimidating or fearful or scary like you see in a movie. That's usually your imagination now kicking in, or a learned behavior of how you're raised. So don't buy into that BS is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, you get asked that all the time, don't you, as a medium? You get asked about the evil spirits, the bad spirits, what happens.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I'm just like, you work in the light, you love in the light, and that's where you're at. And the spirit world, in all the years that I've done this, I've never felt frightened. I've never felt, there's anything to worry about at all.
Yeah. And that's where teaching and being educated and being mentored, because when I did first start down this journey several years ago, 2 decades ago, I did have some, situations where they were a little intimidating. They were a little scary. But over time, I realized it was my own ego, it was my own imagination filling in the new experiences that I was having, right? And so,
And it will, your mind will tell you that that's not normal or that's something frightening. Or it's like when people talk about poltergeist activity. And I always remember Mavis telling a story about that, where this family were very frightened there was activity in their house, but it was just the grandfather in the spirit world. But because you don't know what it is and you can't see it, or maybe you're not understanding of it, then your mind and your ego will tell you to stay safe, and it will tell you that it's something bad, and it's nothing bad at all. But until you know that, and until you develop that yourself, that's a hard thing to get through.
Yeah, exactly. And I would even take that one step further. They've done studies based on poltergeist activity, which is the movement of objects, right? And they have found that when there are young girls coming of age, we have that energy, right? Everything is based on energy, frequency, and vibration, the energy in your heart. They found that a lot of times poltergeist would actually be associated with young girls coming of age and just the emotions and the ability, because it would be like, why is a spirit person going to show up and break a plate against the wall? That makes no intelligent sense to me to be like, hey, I'm here, but I'm going to break a plate or throw a plate against the wall or move a glass across the table. So sometimes we have our own power that we can mistaken for a connection with the spirit world. And they've done several studies. The Psychic Institute there in England has looked at this from an energy standpoint, and it's fascinating. And again, it comes back to just because we don't see it does not mean it's not there and or around us, but it's not filled with doom and gloom and fear. And if you find that to be the case, then you look up Karen or you look up myself and you come get educated with us, and we'll set you on the right path. So
Yeah.
So let's go deeper in that feeling, because you said it's a feeling. What does that look like? What does that sound like when you bring messages from the other side and you're feeling that connection?
You know, the first thing I would say is it feels absolutely wonderful when you connect with spirit. And I think I've spent a lot of time in my life, you know, feeling like unless I have that connection, I don't feel like I'm myself. And, you know, there's been times of stress in my life where I've just been like, I need to connect with spirit to just feel like I'm me again. So it is a powerful feeling, and moving it through my mediumship, or me moving through the power of the mediumship, it just feels alive. It feels like it's moving. When your loved ones come to communicate through me or through any medium, you know, the medium feels that like that person is truly there, because they are, and we know that. But when someone can't see that, they don't quite understand it. And for me, it's a really massive presence. It's a really massive energy boost. And that's the only way I can describe it. It's just so very real.
Yeah, and I can already pick up some of the thoughts from inspired listeners saying, well, what if they possess you? What if they take over your body? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that doesn't happen either. I think that there's a lot of confusion about that as well. Now, mediums can become entranced, and we do. We go into a slight altered state when we are communicating with spirit, because what we're doing is moving our ego out of the way and stepping into the power of our soul and our spirit and our mediumship. So yes, we go into a slightly altered state when we're communicating, but there's never any danger there. And people talk about, you know, you have to do grounding, you have to make sure you're safe, you have to do prayers and rituals. I've never felt like I have to do that, you know, over the top. I always do my prayer to spirit before I start work. I always speak to spirit, and I always say I work in the light. So there's never going to be any, in my experience anyway, any danger of that happening.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because through my studies, I just finished up my 4-year accreditation through the Spiritual National Union, so I'm now an accredited medium, and I think that's important to speak to this, because what Karen is just talking about is described takes several years to move into what's called control mediumship. We have perception mediumship, which is through the mind. You're perceiving the communication, but then control is where you completely surrender and you can channel some very amazing things with the spirit world, but they're not possessing the human body. They're not taking you over. It's not some demon coming in. It's none of that BS or a Hollywood movie. So I just wanted to bring that up, because you can go deep down this rabbit hole with the spirit world, and you can really, if you sit in a circle, if you develop and you're dedicated. But again, this is something, controlled mediumship is something that takes years of dedication, intention, and sitting with the spirit world to develop that relationship. And I've seen over my course of time, I'm sure you have too, Karen, I've seen some amazing demonstrations with controlled mediumship, or what we would also call trance mediumship, a deeper form of mediumship where the spirit person can come forward through the medium and give appearance, can give information, but they're not taking us over. We're always in control, but it's how we attune and how we change our level of consciousness that allows that process to take place. And again, that's something that's usually done over a series of years to get to that point. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that people sometimes, especially early in development, or people that are eager with their development, they want to get to these stages very quickly. And you know, this is a dedicated thing, you know, and it is a lifelong thing, you know, if you're a medium. So, and I always say to students, don't rush it, you know, enjoy the journey. There's not a race with this, you know, it's something that you just go through, and the spirit world will guide you through that.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to go back to Mavis, because Gordon Higginson was one of her mentors when she first started. And she shared this with me, in the fact that many are called, but few are chosen. And I found that to always be interesting, that there are many psychic mediums out there, but what is the work that they're doing? What is the healing that they're bringing forth? Are they representing the spirit world in a certified, accredited, professional manner, or they one day just wake up and say, oh, I want to be a professional medium, get on the stage and have a television show? That's not the conversation Karen and I are having. That is not the path of mediumship. So if that's what you want to explore and prospect for, then that's free will and choice. But the conversation we're having today is about the power of spirit and the true healing that comes with that. And so that leads me to my next question. What has been the most challenging, I think, for you in this journey to become aware of different worlds, to become aware of the spirit world working and walking with us? How do you find that to be the challenge? I guess, what's the most challenging about your work based on where you're at on today's journey?
I think the most challenging thing is actually understanding, when you go into this, that you change personally, you change. Like, this isn't, you know, when you do your mediumship development, you think you're going into mediumship development, but actually what's happening is it's a personal development, and your whole outlook changes, the way that you see things changes, the way that you will tolerate things changes, relationships can change, friendships can change. It really does alter your world. And it's not, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I just feel like you change inwardly first and foremost. You get to know who you truly are. And then that obviously manifests into your mediumship journey. So that was very challenging for me, like knowing that my landscape of my life was changing because I had chosen to fulfill this, but the calling was too much for me. And there's no way that I could have ignored it. I just felt like this was I just felt like I was home. I felt like this was me. This was what I was supposed to do. And it was actually Mavis that first told me. I got up to do an address at a class of hers that I decided to attend, and I was a complete beginner. And she asked me to stand up and give an address on I got a philosophy on a remote control. Yeah. And I had to stand and do philosophy. And after it, she said, well, I hope you're doing your mediumship, young lady, she said, because you have such a power of mediumship to unfold. So that was a great compliment to me. But after that, I actually won a Gordon Higginson scholarship at the college in his memory and his name to do my studies. So all of these teachers you're talking about, I feel, created such a pathway for me to look at my development, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't challenges along the way. And as I'm sure you've went through yourself, Mark, you know, it does become very, very personal, you know.
And it does. And it's, you know, the transformation. And again, for the listeners out there, this is all free will and choice. The spirit world will show up, but they will never impose. It is going to be based on you. If you want to decide to go down this path, based on your own free will and choice, which is the power of incarnation, why we're here in the physical world. But it's no different than the caterpillar metamorphosing, to what Karen just said, into the butterfly. And sometimes it's hard, the landscape changes, and not that the butterfly is better than the caterpillar, but sometimes it's hard to have butterflies speak with caterpillar people because you have transformed, you have evolved. So I think that's a great piece of advice, Karen, for the journey, because the landscape, yes, has completely changed for me. And that was hard to go through because there's a lot of opinions and pundits and, you know, expectations that can come with this. So it's not an easy journey, but again, it's the journey of 1,000 miles begins with that single step. So take it one day at a time and find a good teacher or mentor like Karen that can help you on your journey. With that, Karen, what inspires you today? Who or what inspires you today?
Within my mediumship, I'm still very, very inspired by the late great mediums. That's something that I think I'll always have a connection with. I'll always, you know, hark back to that because I just feel like they created something so special. And hopefully the mediums of today, like you and I and many other thousands of mediums, hopefully that will continue and we will be able to inspire and create But for me, in a personal way, I think my inspiration always is going to come from helping people and helping people see that it's not just about those that have crossed over, it's about themselves,
Right.
it's about their power of spirit, and trying to help people understand that you've got the power. You know, you do have this, and you might not know how to channel that or tap into it, but you can get help with that. You can listen to teachers and mentors and get the help with that, but you all have it, and that inspires me greatly to keep doing my work.
I love that. And just before we close, Karen, go ahead and just let us know where we can find you out there in this world of ours, whether through it's your website or if you've got any events coming up or anything you want to share with the listening audience before we close today's show.
For sure, everyone can go to the website, and everything that I do is on my website. All the podcasts I do go on there, information about my work, everything else, mentorship, it's all on the website. So I would say that's the best place to go.
Well, I love it. Thanks for coming on the show for the first time. You're welcome back anytime if you want to continue to have conversations on the power of spirit, the intelligence of spirit, the healing of the spirit, and what we do as modern day medium. So thank you, Karen, for being on, and really appreciate you. And keep up the great work, okay, my friend?
Thank you so
All
much.
right. All right, inspired listeners. Until our next soul adventure together, be caring, be compassionate, and most importantly, wherever you're at in this world, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and I hope that you'll discover that diamond within. We'll see you next time here on Inspired Living. Take care, everybody.